All right, so here we are. We are going to do another Think with the Drink. That is the weekly webinar series brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. And this one, Craig and I take very, very close to heart, which is how to talk to your kids about money, because it's more about some of the stuff that we don't get taught when we're youngsters or young adults or even into our 20s about dealing with and handling finances that hurts us later on in life. I lost my little button again. Geez. There we go. All right. Quick pre-flight checklist, right? So know that the event is being recorded. However, only what's being recorded is what's being shown on the screen. Just keep your microphones muted. You can leave your camera on. Don't worry about your name or anything because it's not going to be shown in the recording. There is a chat box, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box to drop those in. My co-pilot, who I'll introduce in a second, will be here to answer those questions or to bring them up and to make sure that we stay on track this evening. And speaking of your pilots, my name is Tom Alessi. I am the president of the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. I have been in financial services for 23 years now. I'm an investment advisor. It means I act as a fiduciary whenever giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I want to bring my vice president in. Craig, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I'm the vice president of the Aries Foundation. I've been doing financial services a little 18 years now. I specialize in helping people and families put together financial plans so they can have a better relationship with their money.
And so for those who are in the room, they can see Craig, but for you listening on this later on in the recordings, you can't see him right now. And Craig is in our Wilds Hawaiian shirt. We've got these Hawaiian print golf shirts that we wear when we do some of the golf tournaments. And he's got a fun background. What is that? The Bat Cave?
That is the 1960s Bat Cave.
The 1960s Bat Cave. So I guess trying to bring a little theme of fun into this for dealing with your kids and everything in terms of going through it. So kudos on that in terms of dealing with it. So we told you Think with a Drink is brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. You can visit our website. It's www.ariesfoundation.org. And our mission is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. And that's part of the conversation that we're having tonight, which is some of that emotion, some of that handling of money comes from the previous generation. So whether you realize it or not, you were influenced by something that your parents may have done or how they handled money. And it's a boomerang effect in some cases, right, Craig? Because sometimes it's like, this is how my parents were, this is how my parents did it, so this is how I'm doing it. Or it has the absolute opposite effect, which is my parents may have scrimped and saved. I'm spending like a wild person.
Oh, right. Or the other way, maybe your parents were not so good with money. And so now you have a fear of not having it.
Right.
Lots of different phobias that your parents are there to help disturb you with. I can't wait to see which ones I gave my children.
Yeah. And so some of that, and that's kind of what we're going to go through and talk a little bit about with tonight's presentation. I'm not going to go into the disclosures at this point. So just know we're a nonprofit. This is meant for educational purposes only. And we, Craig, myself, the rest of the Aries team, stress that if you ever need help, whether it's legal, tax, or financial, that you seek out the help of a professional and ask those questions. All right. That was a lot of talking, getting us up to the fun part of this evening. And so we call this Think with a Drink because we specifically want it to be more casual and relaxed for the audience. So hopefully wherever you are, if you're in the audience with us tonight, or if you're listening to us somewhere out there in TV land, that you have something cold to sip on, that you can follow along and do this. Tonight, I am going to be drinking, this is an American take on the classic Czech-style Pilsner, which comes to us from our friends at Loophole Brewing. Loophole is located out in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Now, see, there's one I didn't know about. So it's called Parapet Pilsner, and it's just that they take it to the edge, basically, is the way they describe it, that a parapet is the edge of a wall. And so they like to think of it as the edge to that. So I'm going to see what's going on with Loophole Brewing, but maybe it might be one of those, hey, we need to take a side trip out there sometime to Holyoke.
Make sure you don't drink so much you fall off the parapet. That's
Yeah, I guess that's the whole way. Don't lean too far out. What are you drinking tonight?
So I've got a little bit of a cold going on. So I got a coffee with Bailey's, and I'm
Okay.
drinking it out of my Chippendale camping cup. So
So there you go. So coffee and I don't know if coffee and Bailey's will help you with a cold, but
tastes good though.
it should really be like I was doing last week with the tea thing, where it's basically just trying to keep myself upright at that point.
Well, I was looking for whiskey, but all I had was brandy, and so I figured I'm not doing straight brandy. So
Yeah, that's a tough one. I agree. Anyway, Skull.
Skull.
No. That's tasty. I like that. All right. So the agenda. At what age can you start talking about money? How do we get money, right? What are the conversations to have? Ways of saving things. Okay, that's dealing with young kids, but what about these teenagers or young adults I'm dealing with, and how are we having that conversation? One of that is understanding who's paying for stuff and let them make the mistakes. And then we'll open up for questions at that point. But like I said, there is a chat box so you can drop that in. One thing, though, we do have a special guest appearance. Craig and I were going to be guests of the state of Massachusetts, the treasurer's office on Tuesday. That's this coming Tuesday, April 5th. It's called Correcting Your Financial Mistakes. We did the first part of this, which was repeating financial mistakes, things that we do that get us in trouble over and over and over again. And this is how do we take the steps or measures or ways that we can stop that behavior before it happens. So that's Tuesday, huh?
Or missteps, mistakes, missteps, whatever you
I
want
said
to call it.
missteps. We don't say mistakes.
Oh, you said mistakes.
Did I?
You made a mistake when you just
I
said
made a mistake. See, there you go. Clearly. All right. So it's never too early to teach your kids the value of money. All right. Research shows that kids can start learning as early as age 3. That they can start figuring out or having this conversation. You may say, well, 3 years old, that seems kind of crazy, right? That seems awfully young. But understand at age 3, they can count, right? And by 4, you probably start bringing them to the grocery store with you. You can start to have that conversation about, acquiring things and buying things. By 5 or 6, certainly, they are able to differentiate between a penny and a dime and a quarter. They can figure out the different coins because they've learned that. So there's a lot of different things that can happen very early on where you're at least instilling some of this idea, this concept to them. And then right around, say, 7 or 8, Craig, is, I get them to sort of build on this idea of value, right? So, 5 pennies is a nickel type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you get to 7 or 8, a lot of times that's 2nd or 3rd grade. They're doing a lot of those math skills, the teachers are anyway, doing grouping and all that kind of stuff. So once again, a lot of times they will use as a manipulative coins or paper money. Yeah. So they already started trying to get the concept across them at that point. But you're right. I mean, I had a client I met with this morning who told me that his 2-year-old already has a Roth account. I said, how did he have a Roth account? It was in a TV commercial. So the kid got a check when he was 1 and he started a Roth account for him. And he's got a 529 and he's got his own savings account. I'm like, this kid's 2. He doesn't even know he has it yet. It's awesome.
That's great. Wow. That's pretty cool.
Figured out by the time the kid's retired, if you didn't put another dime in this Roth, he'd have $2 million saved.
Right. Yeah.
It's crazy. Yes. It's great though.
Yeah. And one of the other things, sort of trying to convey is how we get money, right? That's one of those things that learning the value of money, which is that future forward thinking thing, but it's one of those understanding, hey, I work for this. That's how I get it. And then part of that is allowing your child, because I know there's a lot of people out there who don't want to have their kids work when they're in school, like all the way up into college, not having them work when they're going through school. But there's a side of that says they're now acquiring their own money, right?
And there's lots of ways to do that too, Tommy. Like a lot of kids will get money for birthdays, holidays, gifts from family, stuff like that. Another way, some families will put in chores, right? You do chore in exchange for an allowance,
Right,
right?
right, exactly. Yeah.
Or you get an allowance. When we were kids, they had this passbook that you would go to the bank and they'd actually stamp the passbook so you could put your money in and see what kind of interest you got.
Yeah.
Which is, I wish they still had that. It was so cool. It was so exciting to go to the bank and tell her you stamp the thing, this big machine. But it's really just about having them understand the concept between the value of money and goods. Why things cost money. That if you want something, you have to work for it in order to achieve
Right,
it.
because that's the only way you're going to get it. I think that's really the lesson here, is that you have to work fundamentally. That the way we acquire money is through earning it by working. Right.
Well, the majority of it, yes.
Well, the money doesn't come really any other way, and it's like, part of that sort of is this overwhelming sense of entitlement that I don't need to work as hard or need to work as much because I should be getting money. And the problem there is that's not going to work in the real world, right? So you got to have some of that fundamental early on about there's a limitation, right, Greg, that there's only so much money available to us as a family to be able to use.
Right. I think that's a bigger thing. And I think like to get even harder today in today's world for kids to get, even adults, is the fact that, money can be a finite source. There's only so much that you have access to. Right. And it's hard to realize that because a lot of things are bought virtually. So you don't see a lot of that transgression. Like you should just, even just using cash, how much you had in your wallet, how much money you had left to spend. But now everything's so virtual, it's really hard to get your idea on the concept that you have a finite amount to deal with. So it's like, especially in kids. I mean, think about the first experience when your kid's like 2 or 3 years old or 4 years old and you go to the grocery store. All of a sudden you're getting back in the car and you're sitting there with a candy bar you didn't buy. Right. Well, because that's all on the bottom rack for the taking. Right. So it's about trying to understand, well, what even the concept of why do I have to use money? But then, like I said, making it equivalent to, on a real asset, a real thing that they can conceive.
Right. Something they can grasp and get a hold of. And, one of those is children are very visual, right? So visual aids help. So like Craig said, so let's suppose that the young child, whether the child's, 5, 7, whatever the age, gets some money, whether it's birthday money or some money like that. One of the ways to sort of give them, and it's sort of a takeoff on our bucket approach to saving. This is sort of 3 jars, but it's the idea of setting up, whether it's 2 or 3 jars, the screen shows saving, spending, and giving, which we feel is just very important, just from the great grand scheme of the universe and doing good and all of that stuff. But it's trying to say to them, look, you want to spend your money today, that's fine. We put it in this jar. You want to save for something that you want to buy, we put it in this jar. And then we should always think about giving to somebody, whether it's, some charity, some local thing, some local stuff that's going on in the area or in the town, that they might have a connection to. But it's very important to get them to sort of visualize and see it. And, when we're talking about savings, we're not talking about trying to get them too far into the future, but it might just be something that they want a new pair of kicks, or, something that they want to get, right? Something that they've been asking for or want to buy, and you're helping them sort of grasp that concept and get to there.
Well, I think the big thing too, I think you said it right, Tom. Kids can't think too far into the future, right? You're talking like tomorrow, next week, next month, right? Summer to the, kids is like, that's like 3 years long, right? I mean,
Right.
Summer lasts forever. So, I remember as a kid, once again, if I go over and I say, help my grandparents, with the yard work or something when I was like 10 or 12 years old, they maybe give me $5 and I could take that to the arcade and that would give me, 25 quarters. And then I could play for 20 quarters. So I could play so many games. So you start relating the work to a reward. Right. And all of a sudden now you start getting the concept. I want to buy a bike. Well, that's probably a bigger goal. But once again, when you start buying those things for yourself and can see the short-term goal and the benefit from it, all of a sudden you value the item. It's not just a gift. That doesn't come out of the ether. It's something you work for, that you save for, and then you see the impact of, all of what you've done. And that's what kids need. They see that small steps. Big picture is really difficult. Why you shouldn't start saving for retirement for a 2-year-old is probably a hard concept for a 2-year-old to understand.
Yeah. But it is important, and it's very good to be using the visuals with it, because like you said, kids are much more visual, and visual aids help them grasp the concept and easier to help you explain it, especially if you're one of those parents that maybe isn't very good at saving or isn't very good at putting money away, to help sort of demonstrate this is how it's done type of thing.
Well, I remember too, Tom, when I have the first piggy bank I ever had when I was 2 years old. It's this great big plastic. I should have brought it out. I would have thought about it. I would have. Maybe next time. It's a great big giant plastic pig. It's the ugliest, scariest pig you've ever seen in your life, right? And you can put pennies in or change in the top of it or money, but there's no way to get this money out.
Right.
The only hole is that little slot in the top. So and it's just tall. It's huge. It was like 2 feet tall, and I'm 2 years old. It's as tall as me. So you're basically saying you can't spend any of your money until you fill this pig, because there's only one way to get it out, which is to cut a hole in the bottom.
Right.
So it shows you, not only should you have savings that you can see as building up, but you also should put a little bit of a barrier between your savings and your spending, so that you really that that's for a separate use.
Right. You're not just able to dip into it at any time, or pull the little plug out of what's his name there, Ham, the pig in Toy Story, right? His little thing pops out.
But you got to shake it and move it, and it's like a physical thing to get the money out of it, right?
All right. So, not sure about your plan. One of the things you can do is you can schedule a time to chat with us. We're always happy to have a conversation. If you're thinking of things from your own point of view, like how am I visualizing or how am I doing this stuff, reach out. The Calendly link is there. It's www.calendly.com/Moody ST. That's Moody Street, but with ST. And you'll see you can set up a time and we're happy to answer questions for you. All right. So that's all well and good when we're talking about young kids and kids at a very early age. But we got these teenagers and these young adults. What do we do with them, right? So the little graphic there on the screen says, I've got 20 different problems. Money is at least half of them, right? Because that's what goes on with teenagers. So one of the things with teenagers is you can start talking to them about who's paying for what. And when we mean that, we mean, your child might have access to a car. In fact, they may have a car that you've provided to them or for them that you got, whether it was a hand-me-down car or a family member's car or whatever, generally that first vehicle that they're driving around. And you can be paying the insurance and the taxes on it, but maybe it's talking to them about they're paying for the gas, the oil changes, the upkeep, that kind of thing. Sort of give them that sense that like, hey, you've got some skin in the game in this, you got to be paying for this. Same thing with a cell phone, right? You still have them on your family plan. They want to upgrade to, I don't know, God bless what, they have iPhone 13 now? I don't know. I saw this thing, it was green. They made a big deal like this phone is green. I'm like, what's the big deal? It's green. Like, who cares, right?
Cover on it anyway. What difference does it make?
I know, you can put a cover on it, so who cares? But anyway, but with that cell phone, right? So they want to get the new iPhone. Maybe that's, again, it's like, nope, that's fine. You want to do it? That's on you. I'm paying for the bill, but you're paying for the phone. And then you got health insurance, right? So you can cover the young adult up until age 26. It's actually through all the way to the end of age 26 that you can carry them on your health insurance. But then after that, they're on their own. And so, go ahead.
Okay, this is another place, Tom, where, we just talked in the beginning about you having habits that you formed because of the way your parents handled money. Right. So this is another way to stop and see, how am I personally handling money? And am I conveying responsible habits to my kid or teenager as they start their first job, as they start, especially when you're going through high school, there can be a lot of, competition. This kid's driving this car and I don't have the money for that car, or maybe I do and they don't, or, clothing, right? I got to have the Nikes. I got to have the Reebok. I got to have the designer stuff. It's like, teenagers are more about keeping up with the Joneses because you want to be in that clique or league or whatever. But it's understanding the value of, well, if I buy this, I'm giving up that, right? So it's really about understanding the value of money, but also about forming good habits, about, investing and, putting money away into the right things. And this is where you want to talk about credit card debt and why, where how debt starts. Talk those conversations with them before they get into those bad cycles, before they develop those bad habits. Because we all know we've got our own bad habits or missteps that we've done. So our job as parents is to try to help them avoid some of those traps if we can. As little as they will listen to us, at least we can tell them, hey, I told you so.
We'll get to that. That comes up. It comes up. So here's 5 steps to help anybody save money, basically. And the first one there is tracking your expenses. For Craig and I, it's always going to be, where you spend your money. We don't care about a budget, right? It's always about where do you spend your money, because you really can't be saving until you know what you were spending. And so that's one of the things, the conversation with a young adult or a teenager is, where are you spending this money? You just got paid. You're working down the street. You just got paid. Where did the money go? Where did you spend it? Right? Not that I care what you spent it on, but just so you understand, if you're trying to buy something, a new iPhone or whatever, or that you don't have money to do the oil change or, pay for the brake job. Well, what are you going to do, right? You're not driving the car now.
I can't go to the movies with my friends this weekend because I don't have any money.
You don't have any money, right? We're going to talk about the buckets in a second, right? Which is really more about setting up a savings strategy to help anybody sort of plot that out. We'll talk about the 3 buckets in a second. Reduce your spending. It's easier said than done. But what Craig and I mean is to not sweat the small stuff. Don't really get too minute with this whole thing and try to find every nickel and dime. It's more about looking at those line items that are easy to sort of see, like how much do you spend on lunch in a week, and how many times do you go out to dinner, or whatever you're doing for your entertainment and other things. All of that stuff comes out. And you need to see where it's going.
Yeah, the new luxury I'm talking to a lot of clients about, especially younger clients under 30 years old, is spending money on Uber. They just Uber themselves everywhere, and you don't realize how much you're spending on transportation costs just for the convenience of being able to be somewhere in 5 minutes versus 15 minutes on a bus or some other form of or carpooling or doing something else.
And they're not factoring it into their overall, this is what transportation is costing you expense.
Right. It's about convenience.
It's an app, right? I'm not thinking about it. It's not. I didn't know that I spent 12% of my income on transportation because of Uber.
Well, nothing I would have thought of until I had a whole bunch of different clients telling me that this is causing a problem for them. So
So treat yourself like a bill. This is one that Craig and I expound on all the time. That means pay yourself first, right? Make sure the must-pay expenses are getting taken care of. If it's a young adult, that would be paying for the car insurance or making sure that anything like that is covered. And then making sure that you're putting some money away for yourself.
Yeah, and this is important for a lot of reasons, Tom. It's not just because you want to have an emergency fund, which is extremely important, but it's also good for your mental health to know that you have funds set aside in case something should happen, or in case there's something you wanted to do. It just makes you feel more in control of what's going on with your finances, as opposed to you have no money, you're destitute, you don't know where the next dollar is going to come from.
Right. Or if something bad happened, you had no ways to turn to get to it.
Right.
And then it sets smaller goals. And by this, we mean incremental. Okay, I'm trying to save for that new iPhone, or I'm trying to save for whatever. Well, it's not like, hey, I'm going to do all of that tomorrow. But I can sort of plan it out and say, I'd like to buy it in 3 months or 4 months. Hey, in the first month, I want to put away X amount. And then the next month, I want to increase that by 10%. And in the third month, I want to increase that amount by 25%. So you build that up and you keep hitting those goals. It makes it easier from a psychological standpoint to then achieve the next goal. You build upon it and the positive momentum that builds up with that. It works and it happens. You just have to start someplace to make it happen. All right, the buckets. So Craig and I talk about the bucket just about every presentation we do. We end up at the buckets, right? Because it's all about what's in your buckets, right? So you have short, mid, and long-term planning, and you should think of them as separate buckets. The short is your emergency reserve, like Craig had just mentioned and talked about. That bucket needs to get filled first. You know, normally, Craig, what do we talk? 3 to 6 months. That's the planner, the standard.
3 to 6 months of fixed expenses usually. Yep.
Right. But what we're talking about now is more like 6 weeks, right? 6 to 8 weeks of expenses, at least to get that in the bank to start.
Mm-hmm.
The midterm bucket, the one in the middle, is I'm trying to save for something that's, you know, more than a year out, but say no longer than 5 or 6 years in a timeline. Maybe it's an upgrade to a vehicle. Maybe I'm trying to, you know, buy something or take a vacation or do those type of things. There's my mid bucket. And then the long term is I'm trying to save for something, whether that's education for my kid, whether that's buying a home, whether that's retirement. And the way the bucket strategy works is you fill number one first. You're putting money in buckets 2 and 3 at the same time, but you got to make sure bucket 1 gets filled, because like Craig said, when that emergency happens or that situation comes up, if you don't have that bucket to dip into, then it blows up the whole plan. Fill then buckets 2 and 3 once bucket 1 is complete or has at least a cushion in it, right? Some sort of a comfort zone and going through that.
Yeah, because a lot of times I will see clients who have put money into their long-term bucket, but haven't kept filling their short-term bucket after, say, you know, emergency has come up. And so now they're pulling money out of their long-term bucket to fill the other 2, which it really should be the other way around.
Correct, exactly. All right, so little steps that can make big results, right? You know, Craig talked about it. It's about good habits, right? And so teaching your kids about how making savings can be a good habit, right? You know, that there are regular savings that occur, whether that's like Craig talked about. I know they don't have the stupid little passbooks anymore, but maybe it's a once a week trip to the bank, right? Just, hey, for nothing more than to show them this is what happens, right? You know, in a way to save money. You know, the cash only, when we talk about cash only, we really just mean, you know, taking like 1 day a month or 2 days a month and only spending what you have for cash. Don't use the debit card, don't use the credit card. And, you know, that's one of those things, Craig, I think, especially nowadays, that really can drive some of that conversation with parents, that they tend to just swipe at everything.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things out there now for kids where they can have, I think you call them a green card, or, you know, almost like a little credit card, you know, with a debit account of their own, so they can kind of be your mini me, right? Mom shops with a card, I swipe a card. The problem, though, once again, is you keep making money more and more abstract. Why do I have to worry about if I could just swipe a card? I think you're absolutely right. And if you're younger, you know, it's a good habit for us to use cash once in a while, just as a force to go, well, geez, you know, $20 for this, $20 for that. All of a sudden, when you physically have to dole it out, there's some emotional connection to what you're doing.
Right.
For children, it really helps them grasp the concept of something being real. Money's a real thing. Yeah. And then when you spend it, now I don't have it. Well, I want that. Well, I spent the money on this, though. I didn't really want that.
Yeah.
Well, I can't give it back because I've already spent the money. So you start connecting the dots. And that's what you have to do, is understand, when I give up something, I can't have something else. It's gone.
All right.
Right.
Now, this one's going to sound a little counterintuitive to what we just talked about, which was, you know, little goals. But this is the bigger goal. The little goal is to help you get to there. The big goal means okay, the goal is I want to upgrade to a new car. Well, all right, that's the big goal. I'm setting to that. That's my end line. I'm going to set little goals to get to that number. but I need the big goal to start the whole motion. I got to have something that connects me to get going, to move it forward, because otherwise I'm never going to take action.
A big one too, Tom, where someone, well, if I buy a car, can't I just make payments? That's what my parents do, right? Well, a good way to get comfortable with that is, a lot of times you buy a car, you put on a down payment, or you pay the taxes, you pay the registration. So why don't you figure out what would I want to afford for a car payment? Let's say it was $200 a month.
Right.
Well, maybe you should start by saving $200 a month until you hit a certain goal for your down payment. So then you realize, I can't afford that payment. I can make that because I've been saving that.
Right.
There's nothing worse than to get into a situation and find out 3 months, 4 months in that, wow, I really bit off a little more than I could chew there.
Yeah. I have trouble with that. Yeah, absolutely. And let's say shop with a list, right? So that's just the going into someplace, and grocery stores are notorious for this, with just, hey, I'm just I knew I was supposed to go get this, this, and this. And next thing you know, you're walking out with, 15 different items because you didn't have a list and weren't sticking to it. The same thing with a cart. We talk about this with shopping carts. The original, if you go back and look at the original shopping carts, they're like the ones that are in like a CVS or something, those little tiny carts that CVS has. Now you go into grocery stores and they look like small SUVs, the size of these carts now. It's intentional. They want you to be able to think, well, I can put more in here, so I'm just going to buy some more stuff. So just be aware there's a lot that goes on with that, and survey your selection. Did you really need to be picking that item up, or did you really need to have this item in your cart when you do that? And absolutely, when we're talking about buying bigger things, right, set a cooling off period. Can you just wait one day? 24 hours, if you got the same love for it, the same need for it, okay, fine. But realize that a lot of times, and Craig sort of mentioned a little bit of this wants versus need, this give it to me now thing that goes on, especially with younger children, especially with teenagers. Like, I gotta have it today, right? My life will be ruined if I don't have it. That type of behavior, you need to put, not so much pump the brakes on it, but just slow it down a little and say, okay, let's talk about this. Let's go home and have a conversation. And then if tomorrow you still feel the same way and have the same fervor and same attitude, we can talk about it. But you want to have that just take the step back for a moment and make sure that you're following through for all the right reasons. Because this is where we get caught up, Craig, right, in that emotional component part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's really understanding what is a want versus a need. Right, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, right? So yeah, you do need clothes, but you don't necessarily need, $100 pair of jeans. So right. That's a want. No, it's not. I need it. Everybody else has it. I need it. Okay. But the other problem though is sometimes parents fall into those same traps because they've developed those missteps or those bad habits. And so it's hard to coach somebody not to do something when they're watching you do it. My father used to say, do as I say, not as I do. Right. Well, it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to watch them do it and then go, well, you're doing it. I should not be able to do it. Yeah. So, it's the same thing with being responsible with credit cards and managing your debt and, and allowing yourself to be able to have conversations with your children about what things cost or about what you make. How many parents won't even talk to them about this is how much I make a year. Right. Or how much the mortgage is, or, if they can't learn it from you, they're going to learn it from somebody else. You want them to learn it from at home or on the street, right? as we say. Well,
but that's part of it, right? It's that conversation, and this was something else that we've talked about recently in terms of this whole conversation of money as taboo and financials as taboo, and it's sort of that type of behavior that lends this, where suddenly they don't feel comfortable talking about it. And that perpetrates this whole like closed behavior about money and finances and how you act with it. And it's much better to have it out in the open and have that open dialogue and that open conversation, especially later on in life for them when they get into a situation, whether it's as a couple or, they get married or whatever the case may be, because now you've got to have open dialogue. If you don't have open dialogue with your spouse on this is why money ends up being the number one thing that causes fights and problems in any relationship, because we don't know how to talk about it.
And we hide our missteps and we hide our financial shames.
Correct.
Right? We don't want people to know about them. So it's a hard conversation if you don't start early.
Right. And so one of the things is, letting them make mistakes, especially if it's their money, right? It's one thing to give them guidance, but it's another thing every now and then to just let them, what do they say? Step in it, type of thing. Like you buy it, you own it type of thing. Like it's not have this, what is that with the kid with like the ice cream, right? Like you go into the ice cream store, the kid, I really, really want like pistachio or whatever, like, and they give it to him, they go walk out of the store and he tastes it and he's like, I don't want that. I want strawberry. That's what I usually get. That's what I want. And it's like, no, that's what you got. That's what you have. And I don't care how loud you scream or you cry or whatever the case is. You got it. You own it. That's what you're living with.
Well, the problem too is it's our problem, Tom, because we're that helicopter generation, right? We want to solve every problem for our kids. They're upset, they're crying. Well, we can make it better. And that doesn't stop when they're, 5 years old and just getting their knees. They're doing it when they're 15 or 20. They're getting their first jobs coming out of college. I made all these mistakes. Can you help me out? And we go, sure, we can. The problem is you're enabling. If they don't ever learn to fall down, they never learn to pick themselves up. And when you're there, it's great. What happens when you're not there?
Right.
Have several conversations with parents about those issues as well. So.
Yep, absolutely. So it's definitely let them own it type of thing, right? And then how can you help them be better, right? Well, if you're not a reader, try to encourage them through, go online and do some reading, right? Listen to podcasts if you're not a reader, right? There's plenty of financial podcasts out there, right? Have them get involved. Like I had this conversation with a client not too long ago where wanted to open an account for a nephew that the nephew wasn't of age yet. But once the nephew became of age, he's like 13 right now, wants to open an account for him and then, contribute to it that when the nephew becomes 18, have him take over the account and sort of talk to him about what they're buying, what they're investing in, and sort of help him sort of get a grasp. I'm like, that's a great idea. It's a great thing to do because that way he can start to see how this all works. That's getting some experience. And then, encourage them to ask questions, encourage them to come to you and talk about these things and talk about money. It's an open discourse. It's an open dialogue that needs to happen. One of the things that Craig and I try to do with everybody is help figure that vision ahead, right? Because we're dealing, you're stuck in the day to day, right? The road of life, and you've got blockades and whatever, roadblocks and oil patches and all sorts of stuff going on in the road, and it's
construction, potholes, right?
Yeah, potholes. That's what I was looking for. Tough to see the clear vision of the road ahead. That's what we try to do. And one of the tools that we use with that is what we call the roadmap to financial awesomeness. It's just a visual aid to help you sort of get a sense of where you're at right now and then where you want to try to get to. And if you're interested, you can drop yes into the chat box. We're happy to set up a time to, reach out to you and have a connection and, give you the tool that allow you to be able to do that. This is Craig and I in my more formal attire. Yes, those are TB12 jerseys, and we're going to continue to wear them until they tell us otherwise and that he's no longer actually playing anymore. But we wear those when we're out and about and, being at some of the events and conferences that are out there. All right, so keeping the think with a drink theme going, we have what's on tap, what's coming up. And so next week, we're going to do non-taxable retirement income strategies. So one of the things that trips up a lot of people is taxes and retirement and what that does to your income. And so what are the ways or some of the tools that you can do or strategies that are available that are not taxable to you in retirement? On 4/14, everybody should be getting their tax refund by then, or at least file their taxes. What are some things you can do, or some of the things to be thinking about doing with a tax refund? And then on the 21st, we have a very special one. We've got special guests coming from the Perkins School for the Blind. to introduce their employer toolkit, which is to help employers be more inclusive and ways to do that and diversify the workplace. You have any questions for us, you can always reach out. Go to the website, it's www.ariesfoundation.org, or you can email us, it's info@ariesfoundation.org. Craig, any questions in the chat box?
I have no questions in the chat box at this time.
Well, I'm going to say thanks for being part this evening and have a great night.